I'm looking around. I'm not seeing any.
Yes. So the offices are kind of empty.
They're pretty empty.
Yeah, and I walked in. I was like, "That's it? That's all the guys we have?"
Yeah,
right.
Because it turns out that on most days, most of our guys also don't show up. It seems like there's a lot of people missing out there that are not women. I don't know what that's about, but there's also a lot of women missing.
So I'm forced to do both hours with John. That's really the biggest downside of a day without women. So I want to talk about some of the upsides in a second. We do have, of course, an enormous show for you guys. We will talk about how the Republican Party has laid a couple of bear traps for all of us. In one of the stories you'll see, the bottom 90% get a tax cut of $0, and the top 0.1% get an average tax cut of $200,000. $200,000.
That's a spoiler.
It is, but you're gonna have to see the details, and it gives you a good sense of why they wanted to kill Obamacare in the first place. And then the second hour is gonna be a little funky, a little different. I'm throwing a couple of things in there that'll mix it up a little bit.
Yeah,
mix it up a little bit, okay? Yeah. And Samuel Jackson goes after Ben Carson.
He's been on fire lately.
Yeah, and that gets into the issue of what are black people allowed to call each other?
I'm assuming we're not judging.
No.
We're gonna lay down very strict guidelines.
No, as usual, I will be the ultimate judge.
Okay.
Sorry, since I'm raceless, I can enter the fray and make all these decisions, okay? That's the first time I've used that word or that phrasing. I kind of like it.
Raceless?
Yeah.
You don't see color in the mirror.
Yeah, I see brown, olive kind of thing, whatever that is, okay? Olive, why do they say olive? Do we look green? I don't get it.
I don't get it.
Okay, olives are either really green or really black.
Maybe there are other kinds of olives we're not familiar with. I don't know a lot about vegetables,
yeah.
I'm not gonna lie.
Anyways, okay. All right, so big show ahead for you guys. Let's start on International Women's Day, okay? Let me do a little shout out here, okay? Okay, it's International Women's Day. It's a day without women. That's why we're wearing these red TYT shirts in honor of the women who work here. Now, they are at the protests and they're covering them today. And check out facebook.com/theyoungturks for all the live coverage. So, but they're not here doing their regular jobs. And we're hurt, dog. Don't ask us if we're all right. So now Irina is our executive producer, and she forbid me from going through all the women that work here and all the incredibly important jobs and putting up their pictures and names because she said it would look like an in memoriam.
Okay. And they're not dead.
They're not dead. They're just not here for one day. But our executive producer, our
all of the main show producers, basically.
That's right. So today,
I mean Arthur, I guess.
Today, me and John and Jerry are like, how are we gonna put this show together? Anyway,
let alone that. Well, you'll get into it.
Right. Yeah. So Roofer's not here. She puts the show together day to day, and then so look at this. So we already have pictures. They're out there covering this. Obviously, Casper. And then we've got a lot of hosts out there. We've got a lot of
Sandra joining up in the back. I like that.
Yeah,
I think that's Christian.
Producers, editors,
hosts.
Okay. And that's just the LA crew. Our chief marketing officer is in DC, and she's doing hashtag Day Without a Woman and covering the DC protest. And then we've got, I'm not supposed to say all the names. Anyway, we've got the New York crew.
She's in New York by herself, which is a little bit sad, but I'm glad that she's participating.
Yeah,
she's involved.
So I had 3 moments today where I was like, okay, I got to schedule a really important business meeting. So I would normally call our chief of staff, Leah. And I was like, I can't call her. Okay, all right, that's all right. I got to talk to Irina about the show. Gone, can't call her. Right? Yeah. And then I needed to talk to Praveen, our chief marketing officer, about 2 very important upcoming projects coming up. Gone, can't talk to her. So this is the production meeting, such as it is, with all the empty seats. And then we're goofing around because there's no women. All we do is sit there and goof around. We had to even bring in Amir to help.
We did get far less done than we normally do, to be fair.
Yeah.
Look how empty it is.
It turns out we employ a lot of women. There's a lot of empty seats there.
This is like after the bombs fall.
Yeah, it's kind of like one of those movies. That's right.
It's post-apocalyptic.
Like Leftovers, or Leftover on HBO.
Yeah.
Where we're the ones left behind. Or maybe they just took all.
He's one of our tech consultant experts, and he had to do that because we needed him to.
Okay. Anyways, so you get the point. I go on and on about all the important things that are carried here at TYT by the women of TYT Shop TYT, the administrative office, HR. I mean, it goes on and on. So, but I did want to do one other thing for International Women's Day, and it was to honor women in our lives. Now, I don't want to get into all the wonderful women in my life, like my mom and my sister, super strong role models for me and my family, my great aunt, my wife has been a rock for me, yada, yada, right? But I'm talking about in the context of work. So I have 1.5 quick examples. The half is my mom, okay?
Wait, you just said.
No, and I'll tell you why. Because I didn't work under her, but she started her own business before I did.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it was in home textiles, and I've given speeches about this. She's amazing, she's miraculous. No college degree because she didn't have an opportunity to do that when she was growing up in southeastern Turkey, and started a business anyway, and made the best napkins in the world, which are in the White House. The Queen Elizabeth has them. Amazing, Jeez. Amazing. So that's a very long story. But in the context of my career, which is really what's most important here.
That's what the day is about at the end of the day.
I just want to give a quick shout out to MJ Witt, who was my first boss in television. And anybody who's worked with MJ knows she's tough, okay? But she is incredibly loyal and taught me that as a manager and as a boss, that you should expect the best from the people who work for you. And at the same time, you have to deliver the best for them and make sure that in every way you look out for them, you take care of them, and not just in that job, but throughout your entire career. And MJ has been there for us, all the people who worked at Whammy TV down in Miami, including Ben and so many other friends throughout our entire careers. So she set a great example for me, and I learned from her strength and her wisdom, so I appreciate that, and I wanted to bring that out today.
Yeah. And my mom's great too. I'm just gonna say that, but yeah, we're gonna stay off some of the more cliched ones. I don't know, is this cliche? This is cliche adjacent, but I've always had, I have a lot of close male friends, but I've always had a lot of really close female friends, and it seems so cliched to say, but I really do feel like I learn more from them, and I don't mean now, but I mean over the course of my life, and so they've been a great influence. But if we're talking about work. If I think back over the course of what I was doing before I ended up in this career field, in undergrad and in grad school, some of the most influential professors I had were women. So one of the female professors, who's actually Turkish when I was an undergrad, Aksan Bayilgan, she used to start off all the classes with just talk about the political thing going on that you're most interested in. You'd have open dialogue and people would be arguing back and forth. It was the first thing that I did that's sort of like this. And then I go to grad school, and some of my not really even favorite professors, but the professors who mattered the most to me: Bethany Albertson, Wendy Hunter, my dissertation supervisor Tasha Philpott. They didn't just get me interested in politics, because that's one thing. Lots of people are interested in politics, and it can lead to some really shitty work in politics and really uninformed commentary in politics. But they taught me how to think about politics, the tools, the analytical tools, the methodological tools necessary to think about politics and to try to contribute something. And I would not have that if it wasn't for those professors.
You are forcing me to say one last quick shout out to Mrs. Rosenberg. I know this is borders on cliche too, but she was my 4th grade reading teacher, and I had just learned English, and so I was in the lowest remedial reading class, and she moved me up from that class to the very top. She skipped all the other ones to the top reading class by the end of 4th grade. And I said, Mrs. Rosenberg, I barely know English. She's like, no, Jeng, I believe in you. I think you're gonna be really good at reading and talking. Thank you, Mrs. Rosenberg, I appreciate it.
She's like, I should have modulated that a little bit.
Okay, all right, so now Trump's version of A Day Without a Woman. Let's do that.
Exactly. To his credit, Donald Trump did acknowledge that today is International Women's Day. He sent out a pair of tweets. He said this: on International Women's Day, join me in honoring the critical role of women here in America and around the world. That's a very good tweet there. He also said this: I have tremendous respect for women and the many roles they serve that are vital to the fabric of our society and our economy, which is the right thing for him to say. Now, granted, he didn't acknowledge, as far as I've seen in any place, a day without women, but he's acknowledging International Women's Day, which is more than I would have expected from him. But he brought up the respect thing. And it's one thing, it's a good thing to say you have respect for women. It's another thing, a harder thing, to actually live your life that way. And so Jared Jackson put together a few of his greatest hits in him demonstrating the level of respect that he actually has for women. And we're gonna watch it now.
Pregnancy is never, it's a wonderful thing for the woman, it's a wonderful thing for the husband. It's certainly an inconvenience for a business.
You know, you could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever.
Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody.
She's a disgusting pig, right?
Bimbo?
Well, there was a retweet. Yeah, did I say that?
Many times.
Ooh, okay. Excuse me. Nobody.
I mean,
not the most horrible thing, you know, again, politically, not the most. Over your life, Megan, you've been called a lot worse. Is that right? Wouldn't you say?
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form. Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody.
And he went after me on the plane. Yeah, I'm going to go after. Believe me, she would not be my first choice, that I can tell you. Man.
Nobody.
You don't know. That would not be my first choice.
I better use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss.
Nobody.
And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the pussy.
And all of the men, we're petrified to speak to women anymore. We may raise our voice. You know what? The women get it better than we do, folks. All right? They get it better than we do.
You know, I don't want to sound too much like a chauvinist, but when I come home and dinner's not ready, I go through the roof, okay?
She was the winner, and you know, she gained a massive amount of weight, and it was a real problem.
Nobody has more respect for women than I do.
Not only that, her attitude, and we had a real problem with her.
Man, J.R. Jackson, best
job.
senior producer in the business. You know who's better? Nobody.
Nobody. That was a good job. And look, that's just a little sampling of the video. Let's quickly go through some of his tweets. I mean, this was actually in the video. He retweeted this: Fox viewers give low marks to bimbo Megyn Kelly. Will consider the programs. And he just kept retweeting anytime somebody called her a bimbo. And then when called on it, and she was super like, oh, like, hey, you call me a bimbo, maybe that's a little bit messed up. He's like, oh, you've been called worse, I bet. He said this: Ariana Huffington is unattractive both inside and out. I fully understand why her former husband left her for a man. He made a good decision. Because she is so unattractive to him that she creates gay men. That's what he thinks about this woman. If Hillary Clinton can't satisfy her husband, what makes her think she can satisfy America?
Oh my God.
That wasn't 3 years ago when he was a young man of 66. That was during the campaign. He said this about sexual assaults in the military: very understanding, very compassionate. 26,000 unreported sexual assaults in the military, only 238 convictions. What did these geniuses expect when they put men and women together? Well, obviously they're gonna get raped. Why are people acting surprised? Let's see, he said this, talking about his own daughter. Yeah, she's really something, and what a beauty, that one. If I weren't happily married and, you know, her father.
Oy.
That was 2 years ago, sorry, it was 2015. He said many things like that. He also said this, asked about women by New York Magazine. He said, you have to treat them like shit.
And nobody's got more respect for women than he does. Nobody.
You can't find anyone with more respect than those things you have to treat like shit.
Believe me, nobody's got more respect, especially when he does this.
I moved on her like a bitch.
But to be fair, I think there he's calling himself a bitch, but I'm not sure.
That's right, which is such a 40-year-old virgin move. Like, what does that mean? I moved on her like a bitch. Okay, there are hundreds of tweets that are brilliant. I just want to mention 3 others real quick. One is some guy tweeted him grabbing the Statue of Liberty. by the genitals, and I was like, oh no, I can't unsee that. I can't. So I didn't want to subject you to that, but it was a little bit brilliant. And then there's I know there's dozens of these, but here's one on Bette Midler. While Bette Midler is an extremely unattractive woman, I refuse to say that because I always insist on being politically correct.
What's the problem with that? He didn't say it.
No,
he refused.
He literally does the thing I do kidding. Like when I kid around and go, I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
He says it for real. Like, I'm not saying Bette Midler is extremely unattractive, except for the fact that I just did. But I'm not saying it because that would be politically incorrect.
Yeah, and I think about, like, especially today, this day of huge mass activism by women and their allies across the country. I mean, like, there's a lot of great role models, which is awesome, and there's a reason role models are so powerful is because young people, whichever group, in this case women, can look up to that, and it can get them to feel comfortable, like acting in a certain way, going into a certain role or career that they might not otherwise. But we'll never know, having a president who so clearly disdains women and believes that there's extremely limited roles for them in society. Maybe if they're a close blood relative, his favorite daughter, he'll treat them acceptably.
And attractive.
And attractive. He'll still sexualize them, but at least he'll treat them nicely and let them be involved in the business. But otherwise, so dismissive and insulting. Imagine growing up as a young woman and hearing that coming out of the president. That has got to have a negative impact.
And finally, I know it's a random one, but I had forgotten it, and it just gives you a sense of how cheap and ugly he is. In that famous tape on the bus, he also talked about how he tried to basically buy off a married woman by buying her furniture. And so Matthew Dix is one of the guys who tweeted about it. He's like, oh, so how will you be honoring women today, Donald? Buying married women furniture in hopes of having sex with them, perhaps? And that's the one that he moved on like a bitch and refuses advances, even though she could have gotten furniture out of it.
She could have gotten a couch?
Yeah, or maybe a
short-sighted.
You know, a nice leather recliner or something. But the reason I tell you that one is because that's how he sees women. You just buy them. If they're attractive enough, you try to buy them because that's what they're for. And if they're not attractive, well, then they're good for nothing, not even business. So it's okay to think women are attractive. We're all sexual creatures, and it's okay for women to think guys are attractive, yada, yada. But you've got to be able to separate out that there are other facets to human beings.
Yes.
And certainly in the context of work, you can't mix those two things unless you're a really bad guy who doesn't respect women at all.
And so he obviously can't acknowledge that in women that he's interested in. But we've seen that the tapes of him being asked, like, what do you hope for your daughter? What's the best thing about your daughter? He can't say anything other than sexual stuff there too. And it's not just that he sees women that way and he thinks that's how you get a woman is to buy them. It's also that he knows he has to buy them. As rich as he is, as famous as he is, he knows he still has to give them an ottoman. Because they won't touch him otherwise. What a sad little man. He has to take them to IKEA. We get to take them to IKEA. What a sad bastard.
So at the end we end with sad baby.
Baby. God. He once said 12-year-old Paris Hilton, she walked into a room and he was like, who is that? I mean, I'm not into that. I've never been into that. I'm gonna wait 10 years. But he couldn't help it, 12-year-old.
Believe me.
Believe me.
And remember the girl by the escalator? 10 years from now,
I'll be dating you.
I'll be dating you.
Nobody respects 12-year-old women more than him.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Believe me.
Okay, let's turn to something serious, a different area of serious politics. Over the past decade, we've seen funding for the IRS steadily being cut, and in the future, based on things we've heard Trump say, we know that we're likely to see even more of that. And those cuts have consequences. We've already seen those consequences, and it turns out that some extremely influential Americans love those consequences. So in this video, we're gonna break them down. First, I wanna show you the funding for the IRS. So we can bring up this chart. You see it's slowly getting steadily cut away. I mean, the thing is there that it's not that much money when you compare it to other parts of the budget. And when you realize that it is one of the few areas of government that brings in money, the idea that you should cut it to save money becomes somewhat ridiculous. So you see there that it's being inched down over the past few years. Now bring up this, it's gonna be a brief little summary. You can pause it later on YouTube if you want. You're seeing there reduced resources and services. So 13,000 fewer employees. 12,000 of those, the enforcement staff. Lowest individual and business audit levels in a decade. We're gonna go into that. But at the same time, they also have to do far more. There's far more tax returns being filed. There are more important and necessary tax regulations, protections against fraud that they need to be in charge of. And so fewer people to do the work, more work needing to be done. And so should we be surprised that you end up with a chart like this next one, where over the course of the past 10 years, you see the overall level of enforcement, the level of corporate audits going down, and especially audits for the rich, briefly nudging back up there, but then dropping down once again. Now let's put this in concrete terms. For large companies, audit rates fell by nearly 50%, declining from 17.8% back in 2012 to 9.5%. 50% in just 4 years of those audits. Thankfully, I'm sure companies are not doing any funny business with their taxes, so it's quite all right. And then the numbers for individuals also fell as well. And what it turns out is going to happen in the near future is under Trump's budget, the IRS would experience another 14.1% funding cut starting in October of this year. So the funding gets cut, the audits go down on corporations and rich individuals, but shit, it looks like there's gonna be more of that. Does Trump not know that?
Yeah. So let's break this down in a couple of different ways. Number one, this is not by accident; it's on purpose. So, and number two, yes, there are frustrating examples of Democrats who also help their donors. Dime a dozen, I get it, right? But look at what the Republican Party does on a mass scale. So why does all those charts on audits and enforcement dip in 2011? Because Republicans won landslide election results in, or had landslide election results in 2010 elections. So the 2011 Congress is the first Republican Congress, and they go, that's it. We're not funding the IRS anymore. Our rich donors are gonna have a bonanza, and they can cheat on their taxes all they like, and they're very unlikely to get caught. On an individual level, it's now down to 0.7% of people being audited. Okay, so if you are David Koch, you think I have a 99.3% chance that I'm not gonna get audited. So I've got, what does he have? He has over $40 billion. So even if he fudges his taxes a little bit, he's going to save tens of millions of dollars, and very likely he has a 99.3% chance of getting away with it. If he wants to fudge him a lot, he can save hundreds of millions of dollars, perhaps billions of dollars. Thank you very much, Republican Congress that I just bought. You gave me a great rate of return on my investment.
Free money.
Now, when you look at the corporation side, now if your chance of getting audited as a corporation is down to under 10%, you start to do math on that, and you have fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders. You almost have to break the law, okay? Now, I know that they're not, by law, they're not supposed to, obviously, that's the whole point. But remember, they never go to jail. Even though corporations are human beings, no one ever goes to jail. So there's no actual consequences to any of the individuals who do this. In fact, they get bigger and bigger bonuses that year if the company makes more money. And if you think, hey, I only have about a 10% chance of getting audited. If I cheat on my taxes, I save billions of dollars a year. And if I get audited once every 10 years, the penalties would have to be 10x for it to not be worth it.
And we know they're not, even when even when it's not a mistake, but they actually break the law. Like if you launder money as a bank, for instance, if you dump a bunch of oil into the ocean, it's a tiny little penalty that you can just factor into the cost of doing business.
So if you're just talking about maximizing profits, which is the whole point of these corporations that we've built, now we've incentivized them to make sure they don't pay their taxes, because they will very likely get away with it. And even if they get caught at some point within those 10 years, it's still great business on their part to cheat on taxes. And it's not an accident. The corporations are the ones that funded the politicians. My conservative friends, you keep complaining about crony capitalism, and you keep complaining about corrupt politicians. You're 100% right about that. Who do you think corrupted them? It's right here in the numbers. The people who are getting rich off of their corruptions are the ones who paid them to be corrupt. And that leads us finally to Donald Trump. Now, what did Donald Trump say during the debates? He said, I bought all these guys before. I paid contributions, campaign contributions to them, and they did whatever I told them to do. And now that appealed to the right-wing voters. They're like, at least he's being honest about it. Yeah. And he hasn't been bought. He was the one doing the buying. That's not really any better.
No.
So remember, he avoided taxes, was it 18 or 19 years?
I believe it was 18.
Okay, 18 straight years he didn't pay taxes. By the way, we think that was legal, but we know he never shows us any of his taxes, so it's impossible to know. But a guy who, for 2 decades, found a way to avoid taxes, of course doesn't believe that the rich and billionaires and multinational corporations should pay taxes. He just doesn't believe in it. So he's gonna cut, and by the way, it destroys the deficit because every dollar spent into the IRS brings you many dollars back. It's the one part of government where you spend money and the government gets more money, not less money. Yeah. So if by cutting the IRS, they're not saving money, that's an absolute provable lie.
They're saving the rich money.
They're saving rich and multinational corporations and their donors money, and they're costing all the rest of us that money. And you know how much they cost us just between 2008 and 2010? The difference between the taxes that were owed and the taxes that were not paid is $458 billion. And then they tell us that education for your kids, the American dream, is not practical and can't be done because Bernie Sanders' program to give free college education to your kids is $75 billion. $458 billion of taxes not paid by the rich. Well, that's fine, nothing we can do. $75 billion for your kids? Hell no, no way, no way.
But we gotta save money, so we cut another $1 billion from the IRS.
Which then costs us tens of billions of dollars. No, they're making choices, guys. And the choices for the Republican Party, they love the rich. So the fact that that's not in everybody's head and as an absolute fact is unconscionable. The only reason it's not is because television sucks. And for decades now, television has refused to call it like it is. Look at where it is. Look at where the IRS gets cut. Look at where we stop getting revenue from those guys, from multinational corporations. Look at what multinational corporations did. They used to be 35% of the taxes paid. Now they're under 10% of the taxes paid for the overall taxes paid by all Americans.
That is going to disappear if Trump gets his tax plan.
That's right.
That 10% is going to seem like some sort of socialist fantasy in a couple of years.
And television never tells you, of course the Republicans are for the rich. The rich are who finance their elections. That's who put them into power in the first place. So the Democratic Party has 1,000 problems. But the Republican Party is absolutely clear and at the national level, totally hopeless. They will never serve you, and if you think they're serving you, you've been had, you've been took. They're taking from your wallet and giving it to the rich donors. And the fact that you can't understand that now is, well, it's because you were just in the wrong media. I hope nobody ever told you. Or if somebody told you and you're a sucker and you're like, oh, the Kochs have, and by the way, Soros and Bloomberg and the guys on the left too, they have $40 billion, they have $80 billion. But here's another $20 from me. Here's another $200 that I can't afford. Take my money, because God forbid the rich should pay taxes.
Yeah, and look, if they're ever gonna learn the lesson, now I guess is the opportunity, because we already know, I mean, we broke it down as they were choosing their cabinet. Richest cabinet by far ever, American history, right now. And cutting out the middleman, where it used to be that Trump and people like him would have to buy politicians and hope that they do all of their bidding and give all of these benefits to the rich. But now they can just order them themselves, and he can look around and he can give every one of his employees a gigantic tax cut, let alone every member of his family is going to make millions upon millions of dollars every year as a result of the changes that he's pushing for right now. It's amazing that we have a system that allows them to do that.
Yep.
Okay, but that's not all the tax cuts they're gonna be getting. We've got some more for you. Any government program on the scale of something like the Affordable Care Act or the alternative that the Republicans are pushing for right now is at the end of the day about making choices. Who will benefit, who will be hurt, who will get subsidized, who will have to do the subsidizing. And now with this alternative, we've got some stats that are gonna show you exactly where those choices are heading, who is going to benefit under the way things will soon be. Let's bring up this chart, and it's a lot of things. You can look them over if you want. Again, you can pause it if you want, but the biggest and most important number is there at the bottom. $594 billion. This is a chart of all of the effective tax cuts that will be created by getting rid of those portions of the Affordable Care Act, and that is the bill that we're now dealing with. $600 billion in tax cuts without them ever having to have any national debate about tax cuts, without ever having to have a debate in the Senate about tax cuts. They can simply repeal Obamacare and give a tax cut that would make George W. Bush blush in his worst days, and that money just gets flooded out there into the richest individuals.
So let me give you a sense of scale and context here. So the taxes are, in this case, for this particular law, Affordable Care Act, a capital gains, dividend, and interest income for families with $250,000 or more. That's the lion's share of them. Now, the bottom 90% are totally not affected by that. I'll get to the final numbers on how this affects 90% of us in a second. And then the other one is the Medicare surtax. That's 0.9% extra for, again, families making above $250,000. So when you take those two, which is the lion's share of the tax cuts here, by ending Obamacare, as John pointed out to you, they're handing $600 billion to the richest people in America, and to the top 0.1% on average, they're going to get a tax cut that is near $200,000
every year.
Now, for the bottom 90% of us, that's 90% of the country.
Okay, well, what do we get?
What do we get? $0. The tax cuts are zero for us. They're not, hey, we'll see how it turns out, but it might actually be $27 or $127. No. It's $0.
Yeah.
So when they say the tax cuts are good for you, by you, they mean the top 10%, but actually, most of all, the top 0.1%. They don't mean you. You're not getting any tax cuts. Why do you think repealing Obamacare is their #1 priority? But because they really hate it that 20 million extra people are insured? I mean, some of them are draconian, some of them are really bad guys, and maybe they go, I can't wait for them to get sick and die. No, generally speaking, they don't care. They don't care that you're gonna get sick and die. They just want the money. I want the money, I want the $600 billion. And the top 0.1% on average make annually $3.75 million. They make nearly $4 million a year.
Those broke bastards, give them a tax cut.
But they're gonna get a $200,000 a year tax cut anyway. That's why they wanna kill Obamacare. It doesn't have anything to do with healthcare. It has to do with greed is endless. And if they're getting taxed 0.9% more, no. You go die in the streets. I don't give a damn. I want my tax cut.
And of course, we're being way too nice to them, because when we say that you get a zero tax cut, you're not getting a zero tax cut. You are going to pay more for your health insurance in the very near future if this bill actually gets passed. So they get $200,000, you lose out countless thousands of dollars every single year. But we wanted to go a little bit broader here, because this is a chart I'm gonna show you in 1 second, don't bring it up just yet. Very interesting, because we talk a lot about income inequality in this country. Very rarely do we have policies that have a clear goal in the opposite direction, income equality measures. But it turns out, for all of its other problems, and it does have many, the ACA was actually serving the function of a little bit of income equality, pushing in that direction. Let's bring up this chart. This is breaking down all Americans by income quintiles, and you're gonna see there the change in your income because of the Affordable Care Act. So if you're in the bottom 10th percent, there's actually not quintiles, it's by tens. But anyway, in the bottom 10th, you're making effectively more than 7% more income per year. If you're in the second lowest, you're making 5%. It's not much, you're still the poorest Americans, but you're making a little bit more money. But the people above you, they're hurting. Look at that top 10th. They're losing 0.3% of their income, and that cannot be abided. It must be destroyed.
This is why they killed Obamacare, because they had to have their 0.3% extra. So yeah, it covers 20 million more people. Yes, their alternative now, they say is, oh, you still have access to a doctor. If you can't afford it, that's your problem, not my problem. There's Republicans on TV today talking about how, well, why don't you just go to the emergency room? I can't go to the emergency room if I have cancer. That's not how it works. I die if I get cancer. But go to the emergency room bankruptcy. They're like, well, so what? My 0.3% tax cut for the top 10%. Nope, sorry, can't do it, can't do it. So Obamacare was never about healthcare for the Republicans. It was always about greed.
It's about killing the subsidies for the poorest Americans. It seems crazy, but we've reached a point in America where Republicans will kill you for 0.3% of their income. They will watch you die and laugh so that they can get 0.3% more.
Now, when Alan Grayson said that, people said, oh my God, he's so extreme. But in this case, guys, it is literal. It is literal. Because if you don't have insurance and you get cancer, you can't keep going to the emergency room for treatment. I'm giving you one of hundreds of examples. And then you die. That's how health works. If you don't have health, you die. So it's not a hyperbole, it's not a luxury, this is a matter of life and death. And they are saying, yes, we know, and they are admitting it all over TV now.
Yeah.
There will be
It's the old talking points again. The emergency room, that's what they used to say back before the ACA.
So they know that millions of people are gonna lose their health insurance and not going to be covered. And by the way, we're not even talking about the bankruptcies that will be created.
Exactly. And not everyone will die, but their kids will lose out on college. Some will lose their businesses. Some will go bankrupt. Lives will be ruined. Many will die. 30, 40,000 people every single year will die as a result of this repeal, but many other lives will be ruined. They just won't die along the way.
And all because the guys who make nearly $4 million a year had to have another $200,000 in tax cuts. You know, Jason Chaffetz, he talked about choices. Hey man, why don't you just grab an iPhone, not have an iPhone, and just get pay for healthcare instead? Well, first of all, that's not how it works. And those two things are not equivalent. But second of all, you want to talk about choices? You Republicans just made the choice that instead of caring about the healthcare for the entire country, you're going to prioritize the richest people in the country and their tax cuts over the rest of all of us. So in the old days, they would have done in the dark of night, and the idiots on TV wouldn't have told you anything at all, and those stupid pundits would have treated them as honorable gentlemen with just different ideas on how to best do healthcare. Golly gee, the effect it has on the rich? I'm not gonna tell you that. Why? Because the guys who run the TV stations are fabulously rich. Of course they're not gonna tell you that. So now though, you have the internet, now you know. So if you reelect these guys who did this to your healthcare to give tax cuts for the top 0.1%, well, it's all on you, man. Now that's a choice. And you're gonna have to make that choice in upcoming elections.
Should probably take a first break.
Yes.
More to get to though.
Okay, more on the healthcare bill and more on Jason Chaffetz and what a dick he is when we come back.
These are the doors to Planned Parenthood. What we do isn't a secret. It's quality health care for women, men, and young people. STI testing, well woman exams, birth control, sexual assault consultations, and safe, legal abortion. From the clinicians to physicians, from the medical assistants to front office specialists to you, the people we serve. We are all Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood takes care of all of us.
These are my dog tags. I did 7 years in the military, 3 tours in Iraq. As you can see, I was 5'2" and one of the squad leaders. That camaraderie seems very familiar in a Planned Parenthood setting. To come to work, for some reason, it kind of makes me prouder. My name is Sally. I'll be the clinician taking care of you today. It's very nice to see you. So the rapid HIV test is in fact negative. Give you a breather? Excellent. We're providing much needed services to our country.
the Turks. Danny Newberry gave $27 to our journalism drive, and we appreciate that. That's at tytnetwork.com/go. And so to Rebecca Bates, $27. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Read some quick tweets for you guys. Bitchy Gay Guy says, so TYT Live is a giant sausage fest today. Sign me up.
I don't remember. Jesus Christ.
It's funny. Kiki Wellington says, so it's Mrs. Rosenberg we have to blame for Cenk's rants. Don't put that on her, okay? The liberal mom says, I want to give a shout out to Anna. Even though I'm older, she's a role model for myself and others. She is, in fact, too strong.
Yeah.
All right.
And really fast, so I meant to mention it during the first thing, but we were talking briefly about like what TYT is like without women. And like I was trying to like think like what was it like before we hired a bunch of women, but you pointed out, I mean there's never been a TYT without women. Like even like Anna's been here for forever, but even before Anna, there was Jill. Right. There was Zara as well. That was before my time, but
yeah. That's true. I don't know that we ever did a single show. Maybe one.
The first one, I guess.
No, the first one was produced by Zara.
Oh, okay.
And so, yeah, I'm not sure there's ever been a single TYT show not in some way produced or
featuring.
Yeah, I mean Jill Pike would help produce the show, so almost always produced by at least one woman. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Congratulations to you guys. Hiring enough women. Pat on the back.
We're awesome. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying. Okay.
I can tell if he's being sarcastic.
Okay.
I think he was. I think he was.
By the way, in the post game today that John and I will do, I will tell you an inappropriate story I considered for today that John talked me out of.
Jeez. Thank God.
TYT Network.
He saw reason.
tytnetwork.com/join to become a member and find out how inappropriate I am. Okay, Steve-O, our own Steve-O writes in, not a fan of Cenk's t-shirt and suit jacket look, but John looks good though. So that's basically, since
I was worried for a second, thank you.
Yeah, so since we're basically wearing the same shirt, that's just Steve's way of saying Cenk is uglier than John.
No, I went into the bathroom and I put on a suit jacket over and I was like, I don't know, it's red and it's like a black suit jacket. It looked okay. I think it looks fine together.
What do I know? All right.
This is too much red. This is too much. Like I want to show support, but I don't look good in red, not with my skin tone. I look like I'm bleeding, I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway.
Actually, you kind of do, that's true. Miss McHugh says, I wonder if Ken Bone is wearing his red sweater in solidarity today. That's really funny. Hashtag TYT Live. To talk to us on Twitter during the live show. And then finally, Stephen Scales, Republican role, make as much money for your donors as possible. Democratic role, take this cash, shut up, look the other way. That about summarizes it.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, we got more stories for you guys.
Okay, back to the healthcare. Yesterday, Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz got in trouble for his comments about poorer Americans possibly losing access to their healthcare, and it actually got worse for him today. But in case you missed that, here is his original comments.
Americans have choices and they've got to make a choice. And so maybe rather than getting that new iPhone that they just love and they want to go spend hundreds of dollars on that, maybe they should invest in their own health care. They've got to make those decisions themselves.
This is supposed to be a smarter Republican. Like you have the moronic pundits saying, oh, how can you complain about being poor if you have a microwave? How can you complain about being poor if you can wash your clothes? But he's saying it during a policy discussion, which seems a little bit stupid, a little bit ridiculous. We're gonna have more from him. But the reason it got worse for him is that he's making the comparison specifically with an iPhone. Now that's ridiculous, as you pointed out yesterday. Chemo costs a little bit more than an iPhone. If you break a leg, it costs more than an iPhone. In fact, in a lot of hospitals, you cannot get a Band-Aid applied without paying more than most iPhones. But it turns out he's also a massive hypocrite because FEC filings show that Chaffetz's donors not only pay his campaign's Verizon bills, his phone bills, which cost between $400 and $515 every month. That's an iPhone every month, but also on at least one occasion for his Apple electronics themselves. If you bring up this, we've got one of the bills of sale. They spent over $700 at the Apple store, which seems short-sighted because what if he gets sick soon? They already spent the money. But it turns out it's actually even worse than that because since 2014, the Friends of Jason Chaffetz committee has filed more than 20 expenditures for Verizon Wireless for a total of $11,000. $700 more were spent by the committee on 2 iPads back 2 years ago, and they've spent $3,000 at Apple stores. So all of this, his devices, his access to the internet and communication, in addition to, of course, his government paid for healthcare, totally free for Jason Chaffetz, a guy who is just concerned about choice and making the right choices.
So Lee Fang from The Intercept originally broke this story, and it's a wonderful little story about hypocrisy. So as he tells you, just make choices, he never had to make a single choice because of friends of Jason Chaffetz. Now, that's not his friends like, oh, the guy I grew up with, the guy down the street. Those are all rich Republican donors, including multinational corporations like Pfizer. So he helps healthcare companies, they help him, they pay for his iPhone, and then he turns around and says to you, why don't you just get rid of your iPhone so that you can pay healthcare companies more money?
There's every chance in the world that Verizon is a friend of Jason Chaffetz. We should look that up. I do want to play his second clip here though, because I think it makes the hypocrisy look even worse.
People need to make a conscious choice, and I believe in self-reliance, and they're gonna have to make those decisions. Sometimes you gotta make some decisions in your life and where to make those investments in your healthcare, and as an adult, you get to make those decisions and live by those consequences.
It's just about freedom. You get to make those decisions. Maybe you can pay for the illness you have, maybe you can't. Aren't decisions great to be able to make?
This is why people hate politicians. So as he lectures you there, hey, as an adult, there are consequences for your decisions. But Jason Chaffetz doesn't have to make any decisions. He's like, hey, look at that. My iPhone's free, my Verizon bill's free, my healthcare is free. Everything's free for me because I have rich donors. See, I don't have to be an adult. I just have to be their boy. So if I'm just their errand boy and I say, yes, Mr. Donor, yes, what would you like? You'd like me to get rid of Obamacare? And so that saves the rich $600 billion in taxes, and it saves the bottom 90% absolutely $0 in taxes. She's like, I can do that for you, I can do that. Can you please pay my Verizon bill? I'm making choices. I made a choice to be up your ass. And so I'm Jason Chaffetz. For the rest of you, okay. Hey man, get rid of your phone, get rid of your microwave, be an adult.
Yeah. Imagine being lectured to about making choices by a guy whose phone is paid for, his office is paid for, his housing in a lot of cases is paid for, his suit is paid for, his underwear likely bought by donors telling you about what you might have to do if your kid gets cancer. But as bad as Jason Chaffetz's comments are, other Republicans have been using arguments to push for their repeal, their alternative to the Affordable Care Act, that remind me a lot of the way Republicans used to talk about healthcare before there was the Affordable Care Act. When they were still pretending that someday they'd have a plan and, oh, it's too bad that people are dying in the streets. They used some arguments that were not as subtle as the things we grew accustomed to during the ACA battle, during the last 8 years. So here we're gonna play Mick Mulvaney. Let's bring this up.
What's your range of estimate of how many fewer people will have health insurance?
We're looking at it a different way, Mark, because insurance is not really the end goal here, is it? It's one of the conservatives, one of the Republicans' complaints about the Affordable Care Act from the very beginning. It was a great way to get insurance and a lousy way to actually be able to go to the doctor. So we're choosing instead to look at what we think is more important to ordinary people. Can they afford to go to the doctor? And we're absolutely convinced it will be more possible for more people to get better care at the doctor under this plan than it was under Obamacare.
What does that even mean?
So as you pointed out this morning, John, in our production meeting, if you're a progressive, it actually does mean something. So why are we, and Hank Thompson, some great tweets as you were saying in the, last night about this. So why are we paying for the middleman, health insurance, if we just want the health care? So if you did universal health care, then you wouldn't pay the middleman and you get rid of health insurance and you wouldn't be having that conversation. You'd just be talking about getting great care from your doctor. But that is not the conservative position. They hate that position. They like health insurance, private health insurance. They insist on it. So that's why we're talking about it, Mick Mulvaney, because you made us talk about it. So now your alternative is, okay, I'm not giving you a public option. I'm not giving you universal health care. I'm not giving you anything. So your two choices now are either you are rich enough to afford the insurance or you're not.
Yeah.
And then if you're rich, well, you've got the best doctors and everything's taken care of. And if you're not, That's a sad day for you because you're not a Republican donor.
Yeah, over the last 8 years, they kept criticizing the ACA, saying like, oh, look at how this is inconvenient for people, and we're gonna make it better. But now they've gone back to, hey, and when asked the question, well, aren't you worried about people losing access to their health insurance? That's just one perspective on the problem. We're worried about quality. Like, that's their pivot. We're worried people are going to die in the streets. Don't worry about that. We think we have something better. Even though Trump, of course, promised that everyone would be covered. They'd get everything. And let's go to Representative Meadows, because there's no better example of them going back to the arguments of a decade ago than what you're gonna see in this clip.
Everybody has access to, but you can't guarantee that everybody will have coverage.
Well, I mean, we got 318 million people. We're certainly wanting, the goal is to ensure or allow access to all of it. There's a federal law right now that if you show up at a hospital, you get coverage, Allison. And so, you know, it's a false narrative to suggest that we have people who can't go in and get coverage. It's a federal law.
It's the same thing they were saying, both politicians and pundits. You've got an emergency room, what do you need it for? He said insure or have access to. Access to just means that theoretically, if you ever had money, then you could then get health insurance.
No, that statement actually made me angriest of all. And I want to understand what he just did to you right there. He just spit in your face. And if you can't afford insurance, he might have condemned you and your family to possible bankruptcy or literally in this case, death. So when he says you can go to an emergency room, a lot of people think, wait, in my lifetime, when do I go to the emergency room? I twist my ankle or I break my arm, I go to the emergency room. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, we could just go to the emergency room. Now, wait a minute. If you don't have insurance, and they're saying, yeah, millions of people won't have insurance anymore. When you go to the emergency room, something as simple as breaking your arm could cost you $17,000.
Yeah.
Gone. It's you. Which families? Do you know that 75% of Americans have $700 would bankrupt them? Okay,
yeah,
a $700 swing.
They can't take a $700 hit.
That's right. That's 3/4 of Americans. So every emergency room visit is at least 10x of that, right? Maybe if you're in a rural place, it's only 4x of that. Okay, it will bankrupt you. And he goes, yes. So what? If you're not rich, you're going to get bankrupted. So what? You can go to the emergency room and go ahead, destroy your family's finances. And secondly, okay, that's the good news. That's the lesser of the two problems. The other problem is, okay, you got cancer. You can't get chemo treatments. You can't get regular treatments at the emergency room. You know when you show up at the emergency room if you've got cancer? When you're about to die. Because you never got the treatment in the first place. Then yeah, well I guess, and by the way, you'll bankrupt your family in the process. You'll show up, they'll treat you while you die, then you will pass away, and then they'll send the multi-$1,000 bill to your house and bankrupt your family. And jerks like this will come out there and go, well, you had access to healthcare.
Have they never heard of chronic conditions? Like you pointed out, of course, you're never gonna detect the cancer if you're not getting the routine screenings and all that. That's obvious. What if we start to reach a position where a lot of Americans have ongoing cardiovascular problems? What if we ever have that country, America? What if people need insulin? What if they need prescription drugs? I've read about these. They exist. Someone might need them. It turns out you can't just go to the emergency room every week. They're pretending that they've never heard of healthcare or how it works or how sickness works.
Well, look, you elect Republicans, this is what you get. You get Chaffetz telling you about, oh, be an adult and make choices. Just give up your iPhone and you'll be fine. You get Mulvaney telling you, yeah, of course, no, we were lying. We're not gonna cover everybody and they're not gonna get everything unless they're rich. Okay, and then you've got this Meadows guy comes out and laughs at you and goes, yeah, why don't you just go to the emergency room right before you die? Haha, problem solved. You're not one of my donors and I'm done with you. So, okay, there are consequences. So next time you're in a voting booth, you think about pulling that lever for a Republican, know that, hey, if I'm not his donor, I'm maybe literally dead to him. Couldn't care less about me. Okay, we got two more stories for you guys.
Yes. The new Secretary of Transportation was talking about how we're gonna raise the massive amount of money that we're going to need for the infrastructure spending boom that Donald Trump has implied that we're gonna get. I mean, we're talking about numbers of well over $1 trillion. That's going to require some fundraising. Now wait until you find out who's going to pay for it. Let's listen.
Boy, So maybe if I'm hearing you properly, maybe what you're saying is that, for example, if a company were to rebuild a road, they might get their investment back by, say, having a toll on that road, and this way the taxpayers don't pay a penny, they make a profit, it's a win-win, something like that?
Yes, thank you for putting it that way.
Yes, thank you for putting it that way. I'm not sure he knows what a win-win is. I'm also not sure what the taxpayer doesn't pay anything means when tolls. Who pays tolls again?
I'm pretty sure it's
animals?
us.
Is it
Yeah.
spirits? No, you pay the tolls. You pay the tolls. It's about as regressive a way as is possible to raise money for a project.
So
is an individual toll.
So when Trump said, hey, we should spend $1 trillion on infrastructure, I applauded it. That's actually a progressive position. And in fact, we have to spend about $3.7 trillion to fix all the roads and bridges in the country. We do that over a course of years, and it does create a lot of jobs. So, hey, I'm an open-minded guy. I don't oppose Trump because he did something to my family and it's personal. I don't know the guy from Adam. All I care about is what is he doing and what are the consequences of his decisions. So then you find out, oh, he was just kidding. So first off, they're going to have private companies do it. Now that makes sense. If you're building a bridge or a highway, you hire a private construction company and the taxpayers pay for it, but it stimulates the economy, it creates jobs, and it allows transportation, which also helps the economy, which creates more jobs. It has a good virtuous cycle, right? And he says, no, we're gonna let the private guys pay for it, and then they gotta make their money back. Well, that's true. So they're gonna make their money back by doing these tolls. What does that mean? That means we pay for it anyway, but who pays? It's a regressive tax. So if you're using the roads and you're an average guy and you gotta get to work, you pay. You pay every single day for the rest of your life. You will pay that toll to that private construction company, which by the way is guaranteed to be a Republican donor.
And guaranteed to be incredibly profitable. It's not like, oh, we're gonna set up tolls until you get paid back for what you spent on the road. No, you will then have that for decades upon decades.
Now, if the government paid for it, that's taxpayers, but that's all the taxpayers, including the rich, including multinational corporations. When you say the federal government does not pay for it, you take out the corporations, they don't pay a dime. You take out the really rich, they pay just as much as you guys do, but they have all the money in the world. So that tax is super regressive. It is a much higher percentage of your income than it is if David Koch takes that road or George Soros takes that road. It's a tiny fraction, that toll that he pays of his income. Normally, if you take it out of the federal government, we pay proportionately. Not if it's a toll. If it's a toll, you pay disproportionately for the rest of your life. Yeah. So it turns out it's, as with everything with Trump, a giant scam. It's to help his friends in construction that he's known for a long time. It's to help Republican donors who get those projects. And it's to milk you for the rest of your life. And then to make sure that whatever is spent is not spent by the rich and is not spent by corporations.
Yeah. And let's, just in advance, let's not be surprised if they end up not just allowing the private companies to do this work, pay for it, and then they get leases for decades to do tolls. This sounds like a way that a businessman like Trump might allow for the selling off of these things, privatization of roads and bridges on a mass scale. We already see that a lot in America, but it could become bigger. But I do want to play these next two videos because JR found something pretty funny here. So let's roll this next one.
Of our nation to improve our infrastructure is so great that the federal government cannot assume the cost for all of it. So it behooves us as a nation to address the deteriorating infrastructure by thinking about new and innovative ways in which we can fund our infrastructure.
Explain how that works, though.
Yeah, I will. So basically, we allow different kinds of money, private sector money, to come into the United States, I'm not saying foreign, to come and fund, let's say, a bridge or a road, or it can be any kind of infrastructure. We allow different kinds of money, private sector money to come into the United States. I'm not saying foreign.
She's not saying it.
She's saying foreign. By the way, I did a segment when she was first made transportation secretary I was like, well, that's interesting. You know, she keeps going back to the transportation department, Elaine Chao, in different Republican administrations. She's also married to Mitch McConnell. Like, why is she obsessed with transportation? Okay, no, but honestly, like, what, is that a thing?
I hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah, you know why? I did research on it. Her father is an incredibly rich Taiwanese businessman who's made his fortune in transportation.
Huh.
And so when she says, oh, we allow foreign, I mean, I didn't say foreign money in contracts that goes to giant transportation companies. I didn't say foreign. I don't know. I don't know if the Chow family gets rich off this too. I know that her immediate family through Mitch McConnell is getting rich off the donors to begin with. But here's who's not getting rich off this plan. You guys.
Yeah. That was a final moment. We're gonna have to look for that, okay? I mean, the problem is, look, $3.7 trillion, if it's anything like that, it's the same thing that we were worried about with HUD. There are gonna be such huge amounts of money being thrown around, even if a small percentage of it goes to corruption, just to paying off their friends and all that, you're talking about an amount of money that we maybe in the New Deal this stuff is going on. Other than that, we have not seen anything like that in this country for decades. It's gonna be amazing, and Carson and her are gonna be in charge of it. Anyway, are we gonna push through the last story?
Yeah, last.
Okay, I figured you would. A government watchdog group noticed a surprising change to the mission statement for an organization within the EPA, and it's one that might come with some consequences. So if we can bring this up, you're gonna see the original mission statement on the left, the new one on the right, and you wanna pay attention to that top part where it says that the OST, that's the Office of Science and Technology, is responsible for developing sound science-based standards. You'll notice that over on the right-hand side, the new side, there are no references to science there. But there's a reference to OST also develops national economically and technologically achievable performance standards. Now that may sound good, it might even sound a little bit sciencey, but it doesn't mean the same thing. Now for this context, understand that the OST, amongst other things, has historically been in charge of developing clean water standards for states. But if this is the approach that they're gonna take for the OST, if this is something that starts to filter throughout the EPA, there is a major difference between science-based standards and economically achievable standards. One takes what scientists say and directs the agency to make sure that we're comporting with it. The other says, well, we can install a thing, maybe there's a piece of technology, or we should look at something if it's economically feasible. Will this perhaps not cost too much? Will this not harm businesses too much? That is a very different stance for the EPA to take.
Three parts of this. One is, it's called the Office of Science and Technology, and they took out the part about science.
They left technology.
Okay.
They're not merciful.
Second of all, when they say technologically and economically viable, basically, what they're saying is we're going to make decisions on whether we're going to do these or clean up things based on whether we think it's economically viable for the companies.
Yeah.
In fact, that leads to point number 3. Pruitt, who's now the head of the EPA, comes and gives a speech to the staff for his first speech. Does not mention public health once. This is the Environmental Protection Agency charged with protecting the public health. Doesn't mention it. Then he talks about stakeholders. You know, that makes sense. So if you're in charge of an agency, you should care about the public. That should be your number one priority. But you also have to consider other stakeholders, businesses, because you don't want regulations that are too burdensome, et cetera. And then there are other stakeholders as well. Among the stakeholders he listed, he did not include environmentalists at the Environmental Protection Agency. So
well, soon they're going to remove the word environmental.
And so you understand the priorities now. They literally, how many times did we tell you guys on this show? They don't like science. Science involves facts. They like alternative facts. They like propaganda. Facts are bothersome to them. Facts are that climate change is real, it's man-made, we're depleting the ozone, that is affecting our temperature, it's having these devastating consequences. When the facts are inconvenient, you just leave them out. When science is inconvenient, you just leave them out. That's who these guys are. So if you're an anti-science baboon and you think, oh no, me no like science, me no like facts, then great, vote Republican the rest of your life, okay? If you like science, well, the Republican Party is not for you. They just told you.
Yeah.
They literally took out science from the Office of Science and Technology. Ooh, me no like science.
Scary machines. Can you give me an indication, do we have the video that we're supposed to toss to available? Because we're gonna go to our break, but there's something we're supposed to play. Do we have it? I don't see a finger. I'm not sure.
You're gonna see a finger one way.
Perhaps we can do it in the break in the middle of the next hour.
No, the Malala Fund. You guys
Do we
have
have
that?
Yeah.
Oh, we have it,
do.
right? Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. All right, so let me explain. So look, today, I'll do it. Okay. Okay, today in honor of International Women's Day, we are running free Planned Parenthood ads throughout the show. But now in between the 2 hours, we're going to run a video about the Malala Fund. And so, in fact, Malala was the first ever winner of the Turk of the Year award. She took a bullet for, literally in her case, for education, for advancement, and then she set up a fund that at the local, national, and international level raises resources for policy changes that ensure girls get an education for 12 years, complete 12 years of school. So Malala was
for the children of any politician I meet. The Malala Fund is just starting our story, but we are already seeing incredible impact. We are funding leaders and projects on the ground in the developing countries. We're helping girls who would otherwise really struggle to go to school. Secondary education is the basic human right of every girl. There's so much to do. I won't stop until every girl can go to school.
Planned Parenthood provides care for patients across the country, no matter their zip code, their income, their race, their immigration status, their sexual orientation, or gender identity, no matter what. In Washington, some politicians are trying to defund Planned Parenthood. But what does that really mean? Millions of people come to Planned Parenthood for healthcare services like birth control, STD tests, cancer screenings, and sex education. And Planned Parenthood proudly provides safe and legal abortion, a medical procedure federal health programs won't pay for except in extremely rare circumstances. The care that patients get at Planned Parenthood prevents an estimated 579,000 unintended pregnancies each year and saves lives through early detection of cancer and other life-threatening conditions. 60% of the people Planned Parenthood serves rely on federal preventive and essential health care. And just like every other hospital or doctor's office that takes Medicaid or any other insurance, Planned Parenthood is reimbursed for the specific care we give each patient when they come to us. So when politicians talk about defunding Planned Parenthood, they're not talking about striking a line in the federal budget. They're talking about blocking millions of women, men, and young people from getting essential and life-saving care. Here's what their plan would cost Americans. An estimated 1 in 5 women in America have been to a Planned Parenthood in their lifetime. Nearly half of all Planned Parenthood patients are people of color. For many people, Planned Parenthood is the only place they can get care in their community. In fact, more than half of Planned Parenthood health centers are in rural or underserved communities. Defunding Planned Parenthood would be disastrous for our nation's health, and the people who would be hurt most would be those already struggling to get by. Planned Parenthood doctors and clinicians open their doors every day because we believe that every person should have access to the care and information they need to make important decisions about their health and their future. These are basic human rights, and we're doing everything we can to protect them. Visit istandwithpp.org to find out how you can help.
were other immigrants who came here in the bottom of slavery.
All right, we're back on the Young Turks, John and Cenk with you. I forgot my name for a second. International Day Without a Name. Okay. JR is also here. We're going to need him for this next story. But hold. First, let me read you a couple of tweets. Kayleen Babcock says, my morning news in Japan. Hashtag TYT Live. Hashtag big in Japan. Hashtag too strong.
I'm hoping to visit Japan this year, actually.
Oh, you are? I didn't know that. Okay. I was gonna say hi in Japanese, but I forgot it. So I was about to say arigato, Mr. Roboto.
Isn't it konnichiwa?
Konnichiwa, yes. There you
I don't
go.
speak Japanese, but I think.
John heard all those stories we did about how Japan is sexless, and all of a sudden there's a vacation to Japan. I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying.
I'm trying to help, okay?
That's the kind of sweet guy you are. Okay, Aaron in Reno writes in, when is Jason up for election, referring to Chaffetz? He's motivated me to make sure he gets to make those same choices after becoming unemployed.
Every 2 years.
Luckily, he's in the House of Representatives, which means he's up for election every 2 years.
Yeah.
And I want to give you 2 donors for the tytnetwork.com/go journalism drive. And if you get a chance, Jesus, let's see where we are on that. $127 from Sarah and $300 from Matthew. Thank you guys, super appreciate it.
I also saw a lot of tweets of people after watching the video saying that they had donated to lala.org. There's a different donation, obviously. But,
yeah, that's fantastic.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah, and guys, so we're at 1.37 there, almost at 1.5. Dramatic announcements, more journalists, more ass kicking when we get to 1.5. But I wanted to note there, here, bring that up one more time, real quick. 40,000 donations, 40,000 different donations to the journalism drive. I love you guys. This is how we do it together. Thank you.
I'm just glad that people chose not to buy the iPhone, to give instead. Thank you.
We, unlike your current representatives, we actually try to stick up for you. Okay, now let's do the first story. No, it goes to me. So Ben Carson yesterday made outrageous comments about slaves, as usual. So let's share that with you, and then I'm going to give you Samuel L. Jackson's reaction, and you're going to love it.
Where other immigrants who came here in the bottom of slave ships worked even longer, even harder for less. But they too had a dream.
No, they didn't. They had a nightmare. They didn't come here looking for a dream. It was involuntary. They came in chains. And I don't want to go through all the things that happened in slavery again, but apparently Ben Carson's thick head doesn't get it. So let me kick it over to Samuel Jackson. He tweets, okay, Ben Carson. I can't. Immigrants in the bottom of a slave ships? Motherfucker, please. And now the one we're really going to discuss there is hashtag dick-headed Tom.
I've never seen that hashtag before.
Neither have I, but apparently American people liked it because there was 252,000 likes.
God.
So now, to be fair, Ben Carson tried to walk that comment back. He went on Armstrong Williams' show. Let's show you that.
Whether you're voluntary or involuntary, if you come from outside to the inside, you're an immigrant. Slaves came here as involuntary immigrants, but they still had the strength to hold on.
That's not how you...
That's not really how it worked. They actually held on for generations and generations, and a lot of them didn't hang on. They were worked to death. And again, for them, America didn't represent freedom. It represented the exact opposite. Okay.
It's like saying if somebody runs up on you in the street and starts wailing on you, you are an involuntary boxer. Still a boxer.
Yeah, and Republicans love to change words. Estate tax becomes death tax. Torture becomes enhanced interrogation. And now slavery has become involuntary immigration.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all, that's all.
It's so easy, just say, I am extremely sorry for my choice of words. It implied that I don't know about the horrors of slavery. I should have put it a different way. Obviously, slavery is one of the worst tragedies in the history of the world.
So
that's all you have to say. You don't have to say, no, I'm actually right.
Yeah. Well, would Samuel Jackson have accepted that apology? Well, we go to his next quote. He told TMZ, an apology is not going to help.
Oh, okay.
He could quit his job and stop talking, period. How about that?
He has to take a vow of silence.
When asked if he thinks the administration should address it, Jackson added, they probably think the same thing he thinks. Which is why they put him in the office in the first place. Of course they think the same thing he thinks.
Well, they say that they have this idea of the idyllic slavery period where it's like, yeah, the white slave masters are looking after them. They got them housing, they got them health care, occasionally they let them learn to read maybe. It was nice and it was a relaxing time with family and song. They literally say this.
Bill O'Reilly said it.
They say, yes, and
Just
Ben Carson
last year.
is just kind of a stupider version of that, basically.
No,
but
that's
it's the same fiction.
What Samuel Jackson's trying to point out is that that's the whole point of Ben Carson, right? Is so that they could put him forward and say, I didn't say it. I mean, Bill O'Reilly screwed up and said it last year. I mean, it was a youthful indiscretion and 70 some odd years old. But okay, but no, the black guy said it. You see our one black friend, we got him to say it. Slavery, just involuntary immigration, okay?
See, that's what brings about the dictated Tom, am I right? The
Exactly.
hashtag that's heard around the world. Around the Twitterverse. So this is the thing, I always remember there's been a bit of obviously it's a reference off of Uncle Tom. So that's the disparaging term you want to use for a black person who's selling out, who's being the voice that racist white folks want but can't say because it gives them cover. It's easy, it makes it really easy for you. You pick a gay person to talk about how nasty gay people are, and you pick a black person to talk about how disgusting black folks are, and on and on, we know that. But I remember looking up and talking about how you can use that term and whether or not it's acceptable, but people hate to be called that. It comes from the book Uncle Tom's Cabin, which I remember there was something about it. At first, it was the Uncle Tom character was seen as a martyr in the book because he stood up, he was protecting slaves that had escaped or something, I haven't read it, and then he was killed for it. So he was seen as a martyr, as a character, as like this is a really strong, keeps to his will black slave. But I read that around 1919, there was a shift, and when black Americans were getting more of this pride going, they're like, we're not gonna be any more of these Uncle Toms. So it suddenly became a negative thing to be an Uncle Tom, because like you need to be a stronger black person in this. So some people still think it could be a positive term because that was the original thought when the book was written, but it's also taken as a bad thing. So
which do you think that Samuel Jackson meant?
I'm pretty sure he didn't mean it as a compliment. So no, you're right, and there is confusion around that phrase, and it's unfortunate because it got twisted. But now, colloquially, everybody means it as someone who's a sellout, right? Now, interesting conversation is how does it affect different races? Who can say it? Who can't say it? Is it a big deal in the black community to call someone Uncle Tom? Like, is that like almost calling them a word where, like the N word, where you go, hey, be cool, be cool? And is a white person allowed to call a black person Uncle Tom?
It's a stronger version of sellout. Sellout gets tossed around, it's easy. And no, if a white person, it's one of those things, even there's scenarios when white folks will be like, oh, I'm standing up in support of black folks and not selling out. And you start calling black folks Uncle Toms, you're like, okay, well, hold on. You just observe, stop talking. There's still a line.
Yeah.
You don't jump in as if you know enough of the background or have experienced enough of the background of being a black person in America to want to say, hey, yeah, that's right. Me and my black friends can call you sellout black person Uncle Tom. You're like, whoa, okay, cool. I like your supporting, but calm down with the terms.
Yeah, and look, having done the show now for 15 straight years, I'd be surprised if I didn't say it at some point, right? When I got all worked up, right? I don't know what I am anyway, right? So, but I'm not black, okay? I'm raceless, as we were talking about earlier in the show, right? Yeah. Apparently, but and it's not about thought police, guys. And it's not about politically correct. It's about being thoughtful about other people's feelings, and so. Knowing that, I think that it makes sense that, hey, maybe it's not my role to say that, even if I've said it in the past.
We have a society.
Yeah, but even, so part of the reason we're having this conversation is that is not a thing that is said lightly, right? Because now, look, I was in a tour in Charleston, South Carolina just earlier this year, and they explained that the number one thing that the slave revolters, there were several slave revolts. The biggest one involved like 8,000 slaves in South Carolina. And number one thing they had to make sure is that in the words of my African-American tour guide, the house Negroes didn't find out, okay? Because they would be the first to sell you out. And in fact, that particular one, the largest one of the house Negroes did find out. They told the masters, and everybody was arrested, and many of the people planning the revolt were killed. Okay, and so to your point about the right wing says they provided them health care. Was the whipping part of the health care? Were the executions part of the health care? Not quite sure about that.
Separating families and rape.
Right. So now, obviously, Samuel Jackson thinks that Ben Carson deserves it, and Samuel Jackson is not a guy who usually tiptoes around the line. If he thinks he's got it, he'll say it. So, what's your take? Does Ben Carson cross the line, JR, into a dick-headed Tom?
The dick-headed Tom part. I guess that's I'm still trying to picture exactly.
Don't try to picture too hard. Yeah,
it's a fun twist on the term. When you have this consistency, and it's almost like when we saw it, no one went, "Oh my God, I can't believe Ben Carson said such a thing." It was like, oh, here goes Ben Carson again. Yeah. So he has a track record. You can expound on the word all you want, the way that Samuel Jackson did. I'm okay with that. But it's not going to change who he is. So it's kind of falling on deaf ears as far as the target of it. It's not like Ben Carson's going to go, man, Samuel Jackson really knows how much of a sellout I am and how I'm a cover. I think I'll stop doing this. No, it's not going to happen. He's making his money. He's getting his prestige and fulfilling his ego based off of being subordinate to someone who actually hates who he is. So it's okay. Yeah. It's up to him.
I might actually have. I was looking up based on his Twitter activity. I might have another Samuel Jackson story for tomorrow. He's on the warpath. He's starting up all sorts of issues.
So look, a lot of his characters are on the warpath, and it turns out there's a good reason for that because that's the kind of guy he is.
He played one of those characters, one of the reverse.
Yeah, that's right. He played in
Django.
Django Unchained. He played what is the quote unquote house Negro, and so finally, just a quick defense of Ben Carson. That same speech, he did point out what sometimes can happen to a brain to make it say things it shouldn't say. This is a literal quote from that same speech. Every human being, regardless of their ethnicities or their background, they have a brain, the human brain. You can't overload the brain. Have you ever heard people say, don't do that or you'll overload your brain? You can't overload the human brain. And maybe that's what happened, right? And he just got all that brain surgery. He just overloaded it. And remember, guys, not the elephant brain, not a mice brain, the human brain.
He's an expert on the brain. That's his thing. Like, we criticize him for doing other stuff, but that's his thing.
You
can't talk about that.
Can you be an expert on the brain without having one?
I have to look. I don't know.
Okay. All right.
Jeez. Okay. Let's mix it up a little bit. More and more Americans across the country are getting politically active, and in particular, they're getting involved, showing up, town halls, town council meetings, and things like that. They're starting to show up where their representatives are. But not just regular Americans like you and me. Dave Chappelle recently showed up unannounced at a city council meeting in Ohio, where he of course lives, and he began to speak about the relationship, often strained, between police and the residents of that area. And so we want to roll a small section of his comments.
We all knew Officer Grody because his sister was my music teacher. We all knew Officer Banner's children. We all knew Officer Nippers' children. And now we are being policed by what feels like an alien force. Huge gaffe on New Year's Eve. I saw it all go down. I was there with my children, and I was there with my friends and neighbors. In all fairness, the crowd was drunk because it was New Year's Eve. And I left early because nobody felt completely right. So I am trying to be balanced and fair. But what I did want to know is what is this pool of law enforcement that you can pull a chief out of that is special enough to police this town, which is wildly unique. So I would beseech the council to look deeply and to look hard, because this is a golden opportunity. literally could kill the game. In this Trump era, there's an opportunity to show everybody that local politics reigns supreme.
So there, the incident he referred to is on New Year's Eve, there was a taser use by a police officer, which caused a lot of protest in that area. And that's not his whole comments. You can watch the whole comments online, but he did talk about in his own past, he's had his personal safety protected by police officers. He's not anti-police. He likes the way it used to be when it felt like it was a little bit closer to the community. And certainly for that town, but we know that it's across the country, it's not like that anymore.
Yeah, so I love a couple of things he's doing here. Number one, he's doing activism. This is getting involved. And look, I love protests, and there's a lot of different ways that you can get involved. I think voting makes a huge difference. Encouraging other people to vote makes a huge difference. But also showing up and having your voice heard by your local city council.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. And the right wing hates it when left wing celebrities use their power to try to get positive change in the world. They're like, ugh, positive change, right? Now they love right wing celebrities who are like, I want lower taxes and I believe in guns, right? They're like, oh yes, Ted Nugent, Ronald Reagan. Oh, I love you, Scott Baio, whoever the hell you are, Chachi, right? So now I like it when celebrities use their considerable power, because when Dave Chappelle shows up, people pay attention, right?
Yeah.
Even the folks there, they're like, one of the guys in the back was like, is that right? That's Dave Chappelle? Anyway, and so he says, all right, let's do something about policing in this community, Let's fix it together. We got a unique opportunity. And the second reason I liked it is the contrast that he drew up there about the old times and the new times. And we talk about this a lot in regards to policing. And it's not, funny enough, it's not a black and white issue. So in the old times, there were no video cameras and there was a lot of beatings. So I'm not romanticizing the past. And
as well as killings, yeah.
Yes, and you can argue that racism was worse in the old times, right? But there were some things that were better in the old times. So as Chappelle points out, you used to know your local cops. They were from your neighborhood. Now they sometimes bring in cops oftentimes not from your neighborhood, and it's like an occupying army. The guys who did this originally were the LA cops. I mean, look, there's a lot of different communities that did it, but LA was early on. They brought in cops from the South, a lot of them from Alabama and other places, and they didn't live in LA, they didn't live in the communities, they lived in Orange County. And they drive in, and then that's why, among the reasons why LA cops had a brutal reputation, right? For decades and decades and decades.
We also know in some parts of the South, of course, we've tracked police officers who get involved in the shooting, generally of someone who's unarmed, and then we find out what was their recent past. Oh, they've been shuttled from department to department because they keep having incidents.
Yeah, and so when your music teacher's brother is the cop, you could talk it through. You could hey, if there's an issue, you talk to your music teacher. She talks to her brother, and he knows you, and he's less likely to beat you up because he doesn't view you as somebody he's occupying. He views you as, if you're one of the students there, the kid he's got to protect, right? So it just makes a giant difference. I also think that in the old days, they actually used to say, freeze, you're under arrest. This is taking a couple of seconds here before they shot someone. Shooting someone back in the day was a big deal, right? Now it's like, they're taught like, oh, everything's panic time, and if anybody looks at you wrong, and it's a slight 1% or 1% chance that it could cause you harm, just shoot him, kill him, and shoot to kill. So we're much more flippant. So some things are better and some things are much worse these days in policing.
And one of the things that I'm most worried about is fear, not the fear that people have of the cops. And in a lot of areas, they should fear the cops because the cops have these series of excess and brutality and all that. But the fear that's really deadly is the fear that the cops feel, because they think that they are going into a war zone every day. And that makes them twitchy, that makes them see weapons that turn out not to be weapons on people, that makes them fire at people before it's necessary. And of course, you're gonna be more scared of an area where you don't know the area, you don't know any of the people than you would if it was your own hometown. And so should we be surprised that it turns out that cops now are constantly fearing for their lives when they're being shipped around the country to deal with people that they don't understand?
And finally, again, to be fair to the cops, they're not that wrong because there's so many guns in the country. There's about 250 million guns in the country. So when you teach them, hey, anybody can have a gun, in America it's quite literal. That's one of the downsides of having everybody have a gun, is that the cops think, it could be a gun, it could be a gun, I gotta shoot, I gotta save myself first. So we need better training, we need to readjust how people are thinking. I think we need gun control. I mean, look, again, to be fair to cops, people argue against doing gun control on cop-killing bullets, the ones that could pierce armor. They're like, no, I mean, I need the armor-piercing bullets. What do you need it for? The main thing you need it for is to kill cops.
Yeah.
So things have changed. It's not a black and white issue, but if people like Dave Chappelle show up in their local community, even if you're not Chappelle and you're not a celebrity, it could make a difference. Make sure your voice is heard.
Yeah.
And the entire video of Chappelle we'll put in the description box below, and you can watch it through that link.
Do you want to do one more story before the break?
No. Let's take a quick break here, and we've got more important stories, and including great news about crime. You don't often hear that, do you? Okay. And we also have some lighter stories where we make fun of Rudy Giuliani in a very unique way. We'll show you.
I do love my community. It's so small and everyone just helps everyone. It's so great. The only downfall, in my opinion, is opportunity here. There's not much of it. We really need Planned Parenthood here in this community because the teen pregnancy rates are very high. The high schools do not offer sex ed. Our teens really do need to be educated on sex so they don't become parents when they don't plan to or when, they least expect it.
I went to Planned Parenthood to get birth control pills, and I had my first pelvic exam there. This doctor said to me that I had some sort of growth on my ovary, and he insisted that I go see another doctor. It was stage 3 ovarian cancer. It was malignant. The doctor, I have thought about him afterwards. These are our best allies, and I am grateful to him.
Back on the Young Turks. Stephen Flitton writes in, I live in Ireland. Great show. I won't be going to the US for brain surgery anytime soon. I like
Samuel Jackson was also asked, would you let him do brain surgery on you? He's like, not on me. Not on anyone I'm related to.
And then Bob FLV writes in, am I the only one that has noticed the sound quality on #TYT Live is so much better? Thanks. No, Bob, you're not the only one who noticed. Greg Bury, Mike Shekels, and everybody else here, Bart, Jesus, etc., that worked on it. Great job in making the audio far, far better than it was.
I want to know what they did.
Well, look, Greg's a sound engineer, and he recently came back to the program, and that's the thing. Like, if you have resources, then your sound gets better, your video gets better, etc. Like, people look back at some of our old clips, they're like, why is the video quality horrific?
Well, the internet also sucked back then.
It did, but we also had no money.
Yeah.
We had nothing.
No cameras that could do it better.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
it's complicated.
So, tytnetwork.com/join.
It was a big revelation when we figured out that there are people trained in these things.
Yeah. Speaking of the members that power our show, Adam Fernie and Lucy Pedrana are our members of the day. And in the postgame today, I will talk about an inappropriate topic that I thought about doing a segment on today. John almost tackled me and forbid me from doing the story because it's International Women's Day and I'm apparently grossly inappropriate.
I got really uncomfortable, like, I gotta talk to Cenk. We can't do this, but he's gonna be really mad. So he wasn't, thankfully, but I was really worried.
Okay, we'll tell you what that was for the members. Again, tytnetwork.com/join to become a member and power the show and get the post games. Okay, real quick, Emma Kitchens, $3. Oh, I'm not supposed to read the last names. And Greg, $27. Thank you so much, guys, for the funding journalism campaign, and that is tytnetwork.com/go. Thank you. All right, let's go on to the next story. That's me again. Okay.
He just likes to check in on me from time to time. I appreciate it.
Yes. So, interesting set of folks that TMZ caught up with here. Now, this is going to be a wild contrast. And I'm the only one who made this connection, but you'll enjoy it. So, first is political. It's Rudy Giuliani. They caught up with him at an airport in Washington, D.C. Now, they're going to ask him about, hey, isn't the Trump administration a little cray-cray? And he's going to say, no, I like that they're chaotic and a mess. You'll see that in a second. But what I want you to notice while you're watching is this guy thought he was going to be Secretary of State. He was deeply loyal to the Trump campaign, and he thought he was going to get a great position in the cabinet. And turns out, no, he didn't get anything. Because being loyal to Trump and supporting him doesn't mean much if you didn't put down cold hard cash. So look at Rudy Giuliani schlepping around the airport all by himself. Oh yeah, watch.
Sometimes things seem a little scattered in the White House. Like, what advice would you get to just calm things down?
Well, I don't know that I want to calm things down. I want to see change.
Right.
And whenever you have change, you have disruption. So, in a way, I expected this kind of sort of discussion to go on because he's trying to change things and trying to get America moving in a different direction. So far, you look at the market, you look at the jobs growth, he's doing great.
So it's good that the little mix-up and keep things going that way.
I think he's got people thinking. He's got people thinking about the right things, lowering taxes, straightening out health care, making our military much, much stronger. These are the things I believe in.
Okay, so he's got no posse, he's got no crew, and he's like, oh yeah, okay, make the military stronger. I like cray-cray. Okay, so now meanwhile, TMZ also caught up with Darius McCrary. Now, he's the guy who played Eddie Winslow on Family Matters. He's apparently still relevant in the world.
He's still acting.
Okay, all right, bless his heart. And he came out with what vaping or something of some sort.
It was a vape shop.
Yeah. It was a vape shop. And unlike Rudy Giuliani, he actually has a crew with him, okay? He's got more of an entourage than the guy who thought he was gonna be Secretary of State. So, and they are hilarious. I want you to check out his posse. Here's Darius McCrary.
So what's her motivation? I'm gonna tell you, the motivation is TMZ has created a disease called I wanted to be famous so bad I'll say or do anything for it. And that's what the motivation is, because see, if I can be famous, then I can fool all of you into believing a whole bunch of things that aren't true. Yes, I'm gonna tell you that the only time that my baby has seen boiling water is when I was in the kitchen cooking dinner because you too good to cook dinner. Boom!
I need to do that more often on the show. Just say something and walk off.
Woo!
No, Edwin's got to woo, and I got to walk off.
So now look, he's talking about his ex-wife, and they have a lot of drama, and was he holding a baby over a boiling water? Whatever. I don't care about that at all. Okay.
I care a little bit.
Okay. Well, he says he wasn't. Woo! Okay. What I care about is his posse. Rudy couldn't even get two guys to hang out with him going.
Rudy should vape.
And whenever he says like mediocre lines, they get all excited and then they walk with him. Darius McCrary ain't carrying his own bags. Here, I got one more clip for you.
It don't matter who moved out of the house first. It don't matter. You know what? Go ahead and stay where you at, because I'm moving on. I like it better in Orange County anyway. She's much flyer. So, see, when you are a parent, you understand that the decisions you make are life-changing and long-lasting. So I'm not gonna do anything or put any stories out there that would bring shame or embarrassment to my children over their lifetime.
Right. That's a man.
In a long-lasting situation that would be irreversible. The best parts of my children, their mothers gave them. Because I still got mine.
Wait, is he saying that he didn't give anything good to his kids?
I don't.
Is that what he said there?
You're paying too much attention to what he's saying. Okay. And then I realized as I was watching this for the second time now, Rudy not only doesn't have a crew, he was that crew for Trump.
Yeah.
He was the guy in the back going.
Well, technically, Christie was the guy in the back.
No, they were both a silk and diamond, like, woo, yeah, go Donald. And they got nothing for it.
I think it's a little bit worse for Rudy, because not only did he not have the posse, and like he's a former governor, and he thought he was gonna be president multiple times.
Former mayor, yes.
Former mayor, sorry. He also thought he was gonna be president, and then tried to get into Trump's administration, and he's by himself. But not only is he by himself, like, yes, the TMZ guy recognized him. Nobody else is like, hey, Rudy, give me your autograph, Rudy. Nobody cares. Any Minecraft YouTuber in the country would have been recognized more than that in that airport.
So, look, I know I'm the only guy in the country who made that connection, but I enjoyed the contrast there. And I enjoy seeing the guys who groveled to Donald Trump get nothing. Okay, and finally, it's a day without women. We're missing all of our producers here at the Young Turks, hence the wrong share.
That's not the right share. I was trying to figure out what it was, and JR identified it. It is Cher, technically. That's a bad picture.
Can I explain it? Because I feel like you say no.
Sure.
I get it.
Well, I mean, for everyone who may not know it, it's obviously Clueless. But Cher was Alicia Silverstone's character in Clueless.
Yeah.
So when it was put through to make Rudy Giuliani look like Cher from Clueless, it turned into Cher the singer.
Yeah, people always like if there's something that they think is wrong or don't like about that graphic or like a title or a thumbnail, they'll like tweet us. There's no communication. I'm not involved in any of that. Jake's not involved in any of that. We try, but we can't. Also, one other question on the TMZ thing. So they caught this guy outside of a vape shop. Do they just have hundreds of people stationed randomly around the city looking around at all times for any celebrity?
Yes.
That's really what they
Hotbeds.
do?
I don't know if this is one of them, but aren't there celebrity hotbeds where they kind of hang?
So apparently that vape shop in Orange County is a celebrity hotbed. They're like, oh look, that's Darius McCrary's homeboy. And like they spot the white guy and they're like, Darius McCrary as like a C-list, D-list, H-list
he was
guy.
Funny on Family Matters. I don't have a problem with him, but he was also wearing glasses. How did they even know? Maybe the vape shop is calling TMZ.
Hey guys, I hate to jump in. That vape shop, that's in Tarzana. It's not in Orange County.
okay.
I know where that vape shop's at.
Mark's been there.
He works for TMZ on the weekends.
Okay.
Where's Natalie Dormer?
Okay, to give you a sense of how much TMZ's around town, I've been stopped twice by TMZ.
Yeah?
Which makes it one more time than Rudy Giuliani.
Twice more than me. Oh, that'd be weird.
All right, let's keep going.
Okay. I don't know what pop star is gonna end up on this master graphic. I guess we'll just have to see. Anyway, good news for once, and it has to do with crime. Now, if you've been paying attention to politics over the past year or two, Trump has been telling you, as Republicans often do, that this country is an H-hole in terms of crime. It is just on fire, murders and all that. And you know if you watch a show that that's not true. But look at the numbers specifically for teenagers. Here's the arrest rate for teenagers. That's going back to 1980. But you see there that max back in 1994, 95. The blue is gonna be for the overall crimes. The red is for the violent crimes. And like you may not realize how much of a drop that is. But between the mid-90s to 20 years later, it's a third, less than a third of what it was, the arrest rate for juveniles. How is this not a massive story? That's something we've done as a society in terms of government or technology, or maybe we'll get into a few theories in a little bit. The arrest rate for teenagers is just a tiny fraction of what it once was. We should be celebrating as a nation this amazing development.
So that's part of the problem with news. If it bleeds, it leads. So if there's something disastrous, you cover it. If there's good news, it doesn't get as much coverage. We're trying to change that here, obviously, give you the good news, bad news, and give you all of it. And so this is wonderful news. Wow. I mean, the violent crime dropping by, what, 200% basically? If you're down to a third of what it is over 2 decades. Nice job, America. It turns out we were winning all along, and that at least in this case, we didn't have to make America great again. It was already becoming great as we go. And I also want to give you guys this context because you see a lot of things like crime, oh my God, danger, oh my God, what the hell's going on? No, it turns out it's actually much better than it was 20 years ago. And as to why, well, that's a really interesting question. It's a mixed bag. And so, for example, the right wing can say, hey, you know what? They started locking people up at much greater rates, and then there's less crime. And Bill Clinton did, and he got a lot of grief for that from the left, right? So now there was a great article written by Kevin Drum and Mother Jones, I believe, that explained that the biggest factor might be lead. That there was tremendous lead in the air because it used to come out of the car exhausts. And that lead is known to affect your brain's development, lower IQ, and make human beings more violent. So we took the lead out, and this is why the EPA is so important. This is why environmental protection is massively important. And they have study after study showing the effects of lead and what happens. And they go, okay, here's where there's a high concentration of lead and there's a big drop and you see crime dropping this much. Here's a high area of lead and it stays a high area of lead and crime doesn't drop. I mean, you should read the whole thing and it's fascinating, right?
Yeah, I remember when we initially covered it, it's amazing.
Yeah, and so there's a great number of factors. I only just mentioned 2 there, but great news either way.
Well, but the reason why we don't want to talk about it is because, as you said, there's a great number of factors and that's boring. I'm just saying the way Americans consume things.
Yeah,
it's like,
things should be simple, like why the election went the way it was. It was only one reason. One reason. The one I like.
We can't compile more than one reason why something's happening. So it's too much work to listen. If we talk about this extensively on Sunday shows or on random local news, like, oh, guess what crime is going on? Even if it's locally, it's like, oh, where's the fire down on the 405? I'm waiting for that news story. So we don't care. And we're not gonna listen any further. And number 2, politicians don't wanna point out, because if you either have to give credit to someone who was in office when stuff started going down or went up, you can only say, oh, they're the bad guy. You have to take all the credit. And if it hasn't happened, if it happens over multiple presidents, which, how does one president change an entire thing like this? It's other factors. And you have to go further than that. You just wanna say, I'm your savior. I did under me, what Giuliani did with crime, it was me. I walked in, they saw my face and they stopped doing crime.
So this is such a great point by JR because so much of the news is driven by the people that are in power. So if someone raises their hand and says, it was me, it was me, it was me, I get credit, then the news will cover it because someone's trying to take credit for it. But if nobody steps up to do that, they don't bother even reporting on it. Obviously, oh look, by the way,
in that case, it was me.
Honestly, I hadn't even noticed this story, also from Kevin Drum at Mother Jones.
Oh, interesting.
So great job, Kevin Drum. Thank you for covering the things that matter. And obviously, we thought it was important. No matter who gets the credit, right wing, left wing, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and look, we don't know for sure to what extent lead affected this specifically. We do see the evidence that it had effects on a lot of things, including violent crime and that sort of thing. But like, imagine if that is actually the case. And I'm gonna go a little bit crazy here, but so this is like a proxy for a lot of stuff that can be going on in your life. Do you get arrested for a crime? That's a very specific, traceable, measurable thing. But if there's a pollutant in the environment that's affecting us, our brain development, our aggressive nature, how violent we are, the way we think about the world, how deeply we can think about the world, then you might find that kids becoming 10 or 11 these days are not gonna get arrested. But there's a lot of people that weren't affected so much that they kill someone and get arrested. But that doesn't mean that they weren't affected. This could be so much bigger than just a little bit of violent crime. Our politicians grew up in an environment where there was lead all up in the air, affecting them. We're a very war-prone country. We like to use force. I mean, could that not be affected by this too? It doesn't have to simply be, do I steal something from a corner store? It can be the way I approach the world has been affected by growing up in a world filled with lead. In which case, these teenagers could be better, not just smarter than us, but perhaps more moral, less prone to violence. We could have a very positive future ahead of us.
I never thought about it that way.
This think tank here, right?
That's right. No, I never thought about it that way. That's actually a really interesting point. Maybe millennials are simply smarter than the rest of us because they weren't poisoned by lead to the degree that we were.
Yeah.
And certainly our politicians from the older generations. But you know, there is going to be a politician who takes credit for this. Trump sees that graph, he's going to be like, you see, I made America great again. Well, what do you have to do with what happened in the last 20 years? No, it's me. Okay.
If he tweets it right now, he watches TYT. Anyway.
All right, what's next?
Okay, let's really mix it up. Coinciding with International Women's Day, Nike has announced that it's going to be producing a sports hijab for Muslim women, which is amazing. And they've got a famous Muslim, I believe, ice skater, Zahra Lari. You're seeing modeling it, the iconic swoosh, because of course it's Nike. We got some more pictures for you too. And they've actually got a lot of athletes now that they have who are modeling it in different parts of the world, because there's gonna be obviously an international rollout there, being paired with other Nike apparel. We've got a quote from Zahra Lari who said, "I was thrilled and a bit emotional to see Nike prototyping a hijab. I've tried so many different hijabs for performance and so few of them actually work for me. But once I put it on and took it for a spin on the ice, I was blown away by the fit and the lightweight." Now, of course, to some extent, this is a spokesperson for sportswear. So they're gonna say stuff like that. Every shoe is amazing. But think about it, if these weren't actually being made, and I sort of just assumed that they must be, because we see the Iranian soccer team and we see these different teams, but they're apparently just adapting things for normal wear, but all clothing can be customized for athletic use. And so think about how amazing it must be to see one of the biggest sportswear companies in the world suddenly taking an interest in you and producing things specifically for you.
Yeah, so a lot of folks who looked at it thought it kind of looks badass. JR, you were a track star at USC. Were you saying in the morning meeting that guys might start wearing this now?
Oh, I don't know if guys would, but I mean, there's always things like streamlined things. Like it's swimming, you want to take down the drag. Same with running, something more streamlined. Maybe you have like some messy hair. I don't know. You want to take down the drag.
If you have to wear a hijab and it's not aerodynamic, that's going to slow you down, right? That's going to be a major issue in a sporting event where like 0.01 seconds makes the difference.
Yeah.
So look, I'm not a big fan of the hijab. I think that it's a part of the Muslim culture, and that I wish wasn't there. But that's like my opinion, man. And there's a lot of Muslims in the world who wear the hijab, who think it's part of celebrating Islam. I think it's a wrong interpretation of the Quran. Plus, I'm not religious, so it's, I guess, not my place to say, but everything's my place to say, right? So I wish they didn't have to create a hijab, sports hijab, etc. But there are 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, and some of them are female athletes. And so here's I think the best part of the story, and what's going to make the right wing heads explode, because it's an internal contradiction they're not going to know what to do with. If you want to discriminate against Muslims, you're going to lose. Why? Because companies run America, they run the world. Okay. Now I tell you about the dangers of that a lot of times, but one of the upsides of that is that companies have to sell things to 7 billion people on the planet. So they're going to insist on diversity. Why? Because there's 1.6 billion Muslim customers in the world. So whenever I see international ads, it is filled to the room with Muslims. And I told the story on another show where I was like, wow, that Coke ad has like 1 million Muslims in it. And I was like, oh, of course, they're selling Coke. 1.6 out of 7 billion people on the planet are Muslims. Of course they're gonna have Muslims in the ad. And of course they're gonna be open to diversity, because the whole world is diverse.
Yeah, it's like Hollywood trying to appeal more to the Chinese audience, because it's this huge thing that currently is untapped.
That's right. So if you're a racist or a bigot, and you think, and you're right winger, and you think capitalism's awesome, man. Well, capitalism's got a funny surprise for you. Yeah. It's got a lot of different problems, but generally speaking, in this case, bigotry ain't one of them.
Yeah.
And so they're on the opposite side as you. And so, one of the few times, hey, we got the powerful on our side.
Yeah, I love to see it. I mean, like progress, getting an entire society to see half of that society differently is an incredibly slow process, a process ongoing in literally every country in the world. Some have gone farther in it, but every country, including ours, including European countries, still have a ways to go. But I just think about how hard it must be in some societies if you want to be an athlete and you're a woman. And you're fighting to be accepted in different professions, different hobbies, different sports. And if this helps just a little bit, and not just Nike, I mean, it's great that Nike's doing it, but if more people start to take an interest in it, and if that can bring more women into it, then that's an amazing thing. It's just one more step towards a society being where we think it should be.
Yeah.
And it's badass.
And it's badass.
I love it, man. It looks good.
Okay, yeah.
I love that. There was a brief period in my life, and this makes me sound ridiculous. There was a brief period in my life where I was in good enough shape that I was regularly wearing Under Armour, and I miss those days because it looked awesome. I miss them so much.
Yeah, hijabs, they're not for me, but diversity and respecting one another, that is for me. So the fact that we've got multinational corporations on that team, if you will, is a great thing.
Yeah.
Okay, one more story for you guys.
Okay, I was trying to figure out if we were gonna do that, but it's a good story, I'm glad that we are. Okay, a 4-year-old rhinoceros named Vince, who lived in a zoo in France, was unfortunately found dead earlier this week. This is Monday night. He was found shot 3 times in the head inside of the zoo with his horn cut off, apparently with a chainsaw. The white rhinoceros's second horn had also been partially hacked off, indicating the perpetrators had run out of time or their equipment had failed. Now, we're talking about this animal, Vince the rhinoceros. We're also gonna talk about another case of poaching like this, because this is still a worldwide problem. And now apparently it's moving into places where we've never seen it before. This is believed to be the first poached animal inside of a European zoo, at least that we were able to find. Now, why is this going on? Well, rhinoceros horns can be sold on the black market for around 30,000 pounds each, and are particularly sought after in China, where they are believed to have aphrodisiac qualities. So that's in China, but of course, in many other parts of the world, they're used for antiques, gun handles, jewelry, all sorts of things like that. And it's shocking that this happened, that it's inside a zoo. It took place despite security cameras and 5 members of zoo staff living on the site. And remember, gun plus chainsaw, but it still happened.
Well, if that's about at least $50,000, right? That's a lot of incentive to break in, and in the zoo they obviously have some security, but it's not like it's a bank, right? And if there's just $50,000 laying out there for you to take, you might take it. So now, but don't get me wrong, I'm not excusing it. I think what happened was horrific, and the main culprits to me are not the guys who did it. If by God catch them, put them in jail. Don't get me wrong. The main culprits are the people who believe this insanity about how these horns are an aphrodisiac and are willing to pay 30,000 pounds for a rhinoceros horn. Look, there are things that are cultural, and I guess some liberals say, hey, you know, it's all relative. I'm not one of those guys, okay? I think some parts of culture are disastrous, including some parts of American culture, but look, you can take examples from all across the world. Honor killings, horrific, right? In Central Asia, some women are kidnapped, raped, and then the family comes over and convinces them to marry their rapist, right? And that's a tradition, okay? That's a tradition we could do without, right? And so this tradition of thinking that horns are aphrodisiacs is not true. Get it through your thick skulls. It isn't true. And take a goddamn Viagra and be done with it. Okay? It's not gonna make your penis larger. It's not gonna make it more erect. You're paying all that money and butchering these animals for no goddamn reason. And if you think that's part of your culture, I'm sorry, but your culture is wrong. It's just factually incorrect.
And that's totally true. And there's a lot of animals that are sharks obviously suffer for the same reason. A lot of animals suffer because of the belief that they have some sort of medicinal or sexual effect. But even if there wasn't that, there's a lot of people who really think a rifle looks cooler with some ivory on it, or think that for a piano it's necessary, or for jewelry it's necessary. And I understand that a lot of people will rightly say, well, if it's horrific to hack off a horn from a rhino and to put it on jewelry, well, then also using leather and things like that. And I understand that that's a spectrum, and I'm moving on that spectrum. But at the very least, let's understand that these animals are far, far rarer than in other places. I mean, rhinos have, in some rhinos have rebounded a little bit thanks to the efforts of conservationists, but they're still extremely rare. And we're gonna move on to another animal that's even more rare. So conservationists also discovered the body of Satao II, one of the countries is in Kenya, largest, most iconic elephants during a routine flyover of Tsavo National Park. He was likely killed when he was shot by a poisoned arrow in a poaching attempt. They apparently found the body several weeks ago, conducted an investigation. Rangers recovered his long, heavy tusks before poachers claimed them. They also detained 2 poachers believed to be responsible for his death about 2 weeks later, recovering an AK-47 along with bows and poisoned arrows. Now, the reason he's referred to as a tusker is because this is not a normal elephant. This is a rarer type of elephant whose tusks are so long that they can actually reach the ground, and thus they become a more valuable target for poachers. And it's sort of tragic. This elephant was named after another Satao. That one was killed, another tusker was killed by poachers back in 2014. When he was found, his tusks were missing and his face had been so badly mutilated that authorities had difficulty identifying him. Now, there's also some horrifying numbers here. And as I was talking before, this is about rarity too. Poachers kill between 20,000 and 30,000 elephants a year for their tusks. Jesus. That horrific number represents significant progress, because at one point it was over 40,000, and literally more than 10% of all elephants on the planet were being killed each year as a result of poaching. But the tuskers are far more rare than even these elephants. Only 30 tuskers remain in all of Africa. And one was just killed.
And they're killing them for their horns, so some guy thinks that his penis gets a little larger. Jesus Christ, man. Have some sort of decency. And again, if you think I'm being too tough on the Chinese here, as John pointed out, people use it for other reasons as well. And of course, every country and culture has its own problems. We had slavery here in America. That was a pretty terrible part of our culture. And look at, and you could say, hey, look at what you do to your cows. And it's horrific what we do to our cows and pigs, etc. And I eat steak, and maybe I'm a hypocrite too. And I understand that. But we have got to stop killing these animals. There's only 30 left of the tuskers, just for a little bit of profit for something that doesn't even work. It's just, it drives me nuts. And so they should do a public, campaign to let folks know who believe this nonsense that it isn't true. Stop murdering these animals for what you think is your gain, and you're like our right wing here. You don't believe in science, you don't believe in facts, and the things that you believe are grossly wrong and leads to gross injustice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure in some cases, I'm sure they try. In this case, they didn't actually even get the tusks. And it's great that that conservationist organization does this over a big area of this natural preserve, catching some of the poachers. They believe that that poaching group may be sort of broken by these 2 people being taken. And it's great that they do what they do, but it's terrible that the numbers are still as high as they are.
Yep. All right, we're massively out of time. So I got to tell you about things that are coming up for the members. We got the post game and the post game. I'm going to tell you something I don't know, and I'm going to ask you guys what it is. And some of you will be really surprised that I don't know it. Okay,
I don't know yet.
Yes, and it's a known unknown. Okay.
We're also going to talk about the story that you wanted to have on the show today that I desperately try to stop us from covering.
Yes, I was wildly inappropriate. What was I inappropriate about the John Band? And then I have one other thing in the post game, which is a Republican politician said something coded and terrible, and we didn't get to it on the show. And I want to bring it back, and I want to tell you what it is. That's all for the members at tytnetwork.com/join. And you also power the show, by the way. So we thank the members, of course, every day for that. And then finally, old school tonight. I believe it's me, Ben, and Wes. It's going to be a great edition.
You, Wes, and Jimmy, I think. That's what Wes tweeted anyway.
Oh, is that right? Either way, it's going to be awesome. Check out old school. Bye-bye.